I always thought retiring to a quiet, gated community in Arizona would be peaceful. After 25 years working for the Supreme Court, I was ready for sunshine, cacti, and relaxation. What I wasn't prepared for was Katherine. Call me Kathy. Voss, the 50-something HOA president whose authority complex rivaled that of the most power-hungry justices I'd encountered in my career. My name is Russell Johnson, and I'd spent my life working as a judicial security officer at the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. Not the most glamorous position, but one that came with enormous responsibility and a front-row seat to history. After retiring last year, I'd purchased a modest 3-bedroom in Desert Palms Estates, a community that promised harmony with nature in its brochures. The irony of that claim became apparent 3 months after I installed solar panels on my south-facing roof. It was a scorching Tuesday afternoon when the aggressive knocking started. I opened my door to find Kathy Voss standing there in a peach pantsuit, her artificially blonde hair styled in what I can only describe as an architectural achievement. Behind her stood 2 men I recognized from the HOA board, Dale Peterson and Mark Wilson, looking uncomfortable in the 105-degree heat. "Mr. Johnson," Kathy said without a greeting, "we need to discuss your unauthorized roof modifications." I blinked, momentarily confused. My solar panels? They were approved by the Architectural Committee 2 months ago. Kathy's smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. There seems to have been an oversight. Those panels are visible from the street, which violates our aesthetic guidelines. That's impossible, I replied. I specifically confirmed they wouldn't violate any guidelines before installation. I have the approval right here. I reached for the folder I kept by the door for just such occasions. New information has come to light, Kathy interrupted, holding up a manicured hand. The board has reconsidered its position. Those panels need to come down within 30 days. Dale shifted his weight behind her, looking at his shoes. Mark had the decency to appear embarrassed. May I ask what new information? I kept my tone neutral, years of courthouse decorum kicking in. Technical details, she said dismissively. The specifics are in this notice. She thrust an envelope at me. 30 days, Mr. Johnson. As they turned to leave, I called after them. I'd like to attend the next board meeting to discuss this. Kathy paused. That won't be necessary. The decision is final. Something wasn't right. I'd spent my career reading people, and everything about this interaction set off alarm bells. That night I read through the notice, a formal letter citing a previously unmentioned bylaw about reflective surfaces and neighborhood character. It was signed by all 5 board members, though I noted that 2 signatures looked hastily scrawled. The solar installation had cost me $28,000, with an expected break-even point in 7 years. Taking them down wasn't an option. The next morning, I called Hannah Hernandez, my neighbor across the street and the only person I'd really connected with since moving in. Hannah was a retired high school principal with a no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. Kathy's on a power trip again, Hannah said when I explained the situation. You're not the first. Last year she made the Wilsons tear out their xeriscaped front yard because it looked too desert-like. We live in a desert. But why target me? I asked. The panels were approved. Hannah hesitated. Well, there's been talk. Kathy's brother-in-law just started a home maintenance company. Word is he's trying to get an exclusive contract with our HOA. Rumor has it he's also starting to partner with Sunshine Solar. Our competitor, I said, the pieces clicking into place. Exactly. If you went with their competitor. I did. Desert Power installed mine. Hannah sighed. Mystery solved. Though you can't prove anything, of course. But proving things had been my specialty for decades. Before retiring, I'd helped coordinate security for some of the most high-profile Supreme Court cases in recent history. I knew how to investigate, document, and build a case. Hannah, do you know when the next board meeting is? Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at the community center. But they're not public anymore. Kathy changed that rule last month. Residents can only attend if they're on the agenda. I smiled. I think I'll stop by anyway. That evening I began my research. First, I reviewed the HOA's complete bylaws, which I'd downloaded before buying my house. Old habits die hard. There was indeed a clause about reflective surfaces, but it specifically exempted energy-efficient installations approved by the Architectural Committee. My approval was ironclad. Next, I looked into Sunshine Solar. A quick search revealed they were a new company, less than 6 months old, with exactly one review, 5 stars from a Voss. I couldn't help but laugh. Finally, I checked property records. Kathy had purchased her home 4 years ago for $850,000. On a retired bank manager's salary, that seemed steep. I made a note to dig deeper. The next evening, I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early. The door was unlocked, but the meeting room was empty except for Mark, who was arranging chairs. "Oh, Mr. Johnson," he said, looking startled. This is a closed board meeting." "I know," I replied calmly. "But since this concerns my property, I believe I have the right to be present." Mark looked nervous. "Kathy won't like it." "Kathy doesn't have to like it. The bylaws state that any homeowner whose property is being specifically discussed has the right to attend that portion of the meeting." I held up my copy of the bylaws, tabbed to the relevant section. Mark sighed. "Look, between us, I don't agree with this solar panel thing. But Kathy, she has ways of making life difficult. For you or for the community?" He looked around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Both. There's been some financial irregularities I've questioned. Reserve funds that don't match our reports. Contracts awarded without proper bids. Have you considered reporting this? To who? Kathy controls everything, the books, the meetings, the communication with our management company." Before he could continue, the door swung open and Dale entered, followed by the other 2 board members, Tina Garcia and Philip Adams. Last came Kathy, talking on her phone. "Tell him the contract is practically guaranteed," she was saying. "Just make sure the quote comes in under." She stopped abruptly when she saw me. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, then fixed me with a glare. "Mr. Johnson, this is a closed meeting." I smiled politely. "I'm aware. However, since you're discussing my property, I have the right to be present for that portion." I again held up the bylaws. Kathy's face tightened. "That's an outdated copy. We amended that rule last quarter." "Interesting," I replied. "I checked with the county recorder's office today. No amendments have been filed since 2021. The room went quiet. Dale and Philip exchanged glances. Tina suddenly became very interested in her tablet. Kathy recovered quickly. "Fine. You can stay for the relevant agenda item, then you'll need to leave." The meeting began with standard business, approving minutes, reviewing the landscaping budget, discussing a community event. I sat quietly, observing the dynamics. Kathy dominated every conversation, with Dale providing immediate support. Mark and Tina barely spoke, while Philip seemed to function as a swing vote, often looking to Kathy for cues. Finally, they reached architectural violations. "Item 1, Kathy announced. "The Johnson residence, unauthorized solar installation." "Unauthorized?" I interrupted. "I have written approval right here." I placed my approval letter on the table. "That approval was given in error," Kathy replied smoothly. "The Architectural Committee failed to consider the reflective nature of the panels." "The same panels that Sunshine Solar installs?" I asked innocently. Kathy's eyes narrowed. "I'm not familiar with different solar companies." "That's surprising," I said. "Considering your brother-in-law James Voss is a partner in Sunshine Solar, which was incorporated just 4 months ago." A flush crept up Kathy's neck. "My family's business ventures are irrelevant to this meeting. They become relevant when there's a conflict of interest," I responded. "Especially when that conflict might explain why my approved installation is suddenly being challenged." Dale jumped in. "Now wait a minute, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's an observation." I said calmly. Just like I observed that the HOA paid Sunshine Solar $15,000 last month for a consultation on community solar options, according to your published financial statement. Tina's head snapped up. What consultation? We never approved that. Kathy shot her a warning look. It was in last month's consent agenda. Hidden in a line item for energy efficiency studies, I added, sliding a copy of the budget across the table. An interesting way to categorize it. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as board members began exchanging concerned glances. Mr. Johnson, Kathy said, her voice tight, I don't appreciate these insinuations. The board has made its decision regarding your non-compliant installation. You have 30 days to remove the panels. I leaned back in my chair. Before we continue, I should probably introduce myself properly. While I'm retired now, I spent 25 years as a judicial security officer for the United States Supreme Court, specializing in investigation and threat assessment. I reached into my pocket and placed my credential wallet on the table, open to display my Supreme Court police badge and ID. It was still valid, as retirees retained credentials for identification purposes. In that capacity, I became familiar with various federal laws, including those protecting homeowners' rights to install solar energy systems. The Federal Solar Access Law specifically prohibits HOAs from creating rules that effectively prevent homeowners from installing solar panels. Kathy stared at my badge, her expression frozen. Additionally, I continued, Arizona has its own solar rights law, which limits an HOA's ability to prohibit solar installations. Your attempt to force me to remove already approved panels appears to violate both federal and state law. Mark cleared his throat. He's right. I researched this after our last meeting. We can't legally make him take them down. Kathy's composure cracked. This is absurd. We have aesthetic standards to maintain. Standards that were satisfied when the Architectural Committee approved my installation, I replied. Now, about those financial irregularities, this meeting is adjourned. Kathy snapped, gathering her papers. Actually, Philip said, surprising everyone, I move that we confirm Mr. Johnson's solar installation as compliant and properly approved. It was the first independent statement he'd made all evening. I second, said Tina quickly. This is out of order, Kathy protested. Call the vote, Madam President, Mark said firmly. The motion passed 4-1, with only Kathy dissenting. As the meeting broke up, Kathy stormed out, but not before hissing at me. This isn't over. She was right about that, though not in the way she intended. The next morning, I received a text from Mark. Emergency board meeting called for tonight. Closed session. Something about financial audits. I spent the day doing what I did best, building a case. I visited the county recorder's office again and pulled every financial document the HOA had filed. I called a friend at the FBI's white-collar crime division for advice. By evening, I had a clear picture of what had been happening in our community. At 6:30 p.m., I walked to the community center. Through the window, I could see Kathy gesticulating wildly while the other board members sat with grim expressions. I wasn't invited to this meeting, but I knew what was happening inside. Mark had texted me updates. They'd discovered nearly $200,000 in questionable transactions over the past 2 years. Contracts awarded to companies connected to Kathy's family. Reserve funds borrowed for operational expenses that couldn't be accounted for. At 7:15, the door opened, and Mark beckoned me inside. Mr. Johnson, he said formally, the board would like your advice. Kathy sat at the head of the table, her face pale. Dale looked shell-shocked. Philip and Tina appeared resolved. We've uncovered some discrepancies, Mark explained. Given your background, we thought you might have insights on how to proceed. I laid out my findings, including connections I'd discovered between Kathy, her brother-in-law's company, and 3 other vendors who'd received HOA contracts. I explained the potential legal implications: embezzlement, fraud, misappropriation of funds. This is character assassination, Kathy finally erupted. You're all overreacting to some accounting errors. $197,642 is more than an accounting error, Tina said quietly. I move to remove Kathy Voss as president, effective immediately, Philip stated. You can't do that, Kathy protested. According to the bylaws, we can, Mark replied. With cause. The vote was unanimous, even Dale concurring after seeing the evidence. This is ridiculous, Kathy snapped, grabbing her purse. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. As she reached the door, it swung open to reveal 2 police officers and a man in a suit. Katherine Voss? The suited man asked, showing his badge. Detective Wilson, Arizona Financial Crimes Task Force. We'd like to ask you some questions about Desert Palms Estate's financial accounts. Kathy's face went from red to white in seconds. I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps we should discuss this at the station, he suggested. We have subpoenas for the HOA's financial records. As the officers escorted a protesting Kathy out, the remaining board members turned to me in shock. Did you call them? Mark asked. I shook my head. No, but I did speak with some former colleagues yesterday who may have passed along information. Financial crimes across HOAs have been on the rise. The authorities take them seriously. The aftermath was both swift and prolonged. Kathy was charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The investigation revealed she'd been skimming from HOA funds for years, using her position to award contracts to family members' businesses, and hiding the financial trail through creative accounting. Dale, it turned out, had been a mostly unwitting accomplice, signing documents without proper review. Mark became the interim president, with Hannah elected to fill the board vacancy. The community held a special meeting where residents voiced long-suppressed complaints about Kathy's reign, selective enforcement of rules, retribution against those who challenged her, and a pervasive culture of fear. My solar panels, needless to say, stayed right where they were. The HOA even revised its guidelines to explicitly encourage renewable energy installations, provided they met basic aesthetic considerations. 6 months later, I sat on my back patio with Hannah, enjoying the sunset and the knowledge that my solar panels were powering the ceiling fan keeping us cool. You know, Hannah said, sipping her iced tea, when you moved in, I thought you were just a quiet retiree who wanted to be left alone. I smiled. That was the plan. Thank goodness Kathy messed with the wrong quiet retiree. She raised her glass. To solar power and justice. I clinked my glass against hers. To finding unexpected purpose in retirement. And as the sun set over the desert mountains, casting a golden glow across our community, I reflected that while I'd left the Supreme Court behind, I'd never really stopped protecting people's rights, just on a smaller, more personal scale. Sometimes justice begins at home, or in my case, on the roof above it.